So the New Hampshire primary, the first primary, we had a caucus, and now we have our first primary. And although all of the precincts haven't reported yet, it looks like Bernie Sanders is ahead, and Pete Buttigieg is probably coming in second. And then we have probably Elizabeth Warren, and Joe Biden looks like he may be fourth or fifth. But there's some other interesting news coming out of this primary, and it's not just what's happening with the Democrats, Corinne, it's what's happening with the Republicans. It looks like maybe 15% of registered Republicans in New Hampshire did not vote for the sitting president, Donald Trump. How do you explain that? Trump is always talking about he has 90%, 100%, 110, 200% support from the world, and particularly from Republicans. But this is kind of a startling number.
Right. Well, I haven't actually seen those reports yet, but I know that he did have a rally last night in New Hampshire to where they had over 50,000 people signed up and attendees. So I see that his support in New Hampshire is just as strong as it was.
Yeah, I think that number was somewhere around 11,000. Trump likes to exaggerate his crowd size. Yeah, just keep it real, Brooke. He lies.
Okay to say that. He lies. Well,
yeah, he lies.
That's not the number of the campaign.
About
that's
crowd
not the numbers that were out.
Yeah, I don't even know if there's a stadium big enough in New Hampshire to seat 50,000. But that's not but the bigger issue is, are we seeing a break in the firewall of Republicans? And I think that's something that we should look at, because it's been assumed that Trump would get almost 100% Republican votes. But there's some candidates, right, Brooke, on the Democratic ticket that might be able to pull some Republican votes.
I can't imagine anything significant, but I do think the biggest troll of all that we've seen so far is GOP voters writing in Bloomberg.
Yeah.
That's been fascinating. It works. It works.
Well, I can imagine some of those Republican voters actually voting for Mike Bloomberg,
yeah,
particularly those
who...
He
was their mayor in New York City.
And someone who they want strong on the economy, think that, he's a businessman, he's a billionaire like Trump. So
the anti-black rhetoric sometimes, I think.
Well, we're going to talk about that. This recent audio, his speech at the Aspen Institute, do you think he can recover from this?
Yes. And that's simply because of money in politics. Because he can buy.
I think we have the speech, but let's take a listen to it.
It's pretty bad.
Just keep saying, it's a disproportionate percentage of a particular ethnic group. That may be, but it's not a disproportionate percentage of those who witnesses and victims describe as committing the murder. In that case, incidentally, I think we disproportionately stop whites too much and minorities too little.
Yeah, let me be clear. I don't think he should recover from this. I'm saying he
should not recover from that.
It's kind of a reverse discrimination. We call that reverse discrimination in the law.
The question is, can he? And yeah, for sure, absolutely.
But here's the interesting part, though. With all his problems with that crazy statement and stop and frisk, he is still leading in the polls with black folks above 3 of the major Democratic candidates.
Because his ad dollars he spent a lot of money in South Carolina, although he's not participating in the primary there. But he's spending a lot of money getting on your television, spending a lot of money digitally, trying to fight back, kind of press back against what the Trump campaign uses and what helps them.
But don't you think black voters are more sophisticated than that? I mean, we're not going to just turn on the television, see a guy on TV and say, that's our guy. Exactly. I think that, black voters, historically, we are pragmatic as voters, and there's concern about Biden. And he was supposed to come into the race and be the moderate, the centrist, and his numbers have been tanking. And those black voters, why do you think, Brooke, they're not going to any of the other established candidates, and they are migrating to Bloomberg, despite his history on stop and frisk? And we should be clear, that's just the beginning. There's so much other stuff out there.
And he didn't apologize for stop and frisk until a week before he announced officially that he was running for president. That was last year.
But why do you think black voters who know that are migrating to him?
Saying that ads are important is like the equivalent to saying that black people are stupid and just see what's on TV. I think we're all human. And I think that people buy campaign ads. If they didn't work, nobody would be spending any money there.
$350 million.
Exactly.
I think he should get out there with the people.
We're all human. I think it's an all people campaign.
Every other candidate has to campaign. That's why it's called campaign. Get out there in front of the voters, meet people, shake hands. Don't hide behind your video camera and just buy ads. I mean, I haven't seen him on one debate stage. I don't know how he can interact with the other candidates. I don't know how he interacts with the rest of his party. And, you know, all I have been seeing from these debates is the Democrat Party just going downhill fast. All they're doing is attacking each other. They can't figure out who they are. They can't figure out their message, and they have no plan for America.
Brooke, do you think the Democratic Party has no plan for America? I would say Elizabeth Warren has a plan for everything.
She has 60 million plans. Yeah, absolutely. Even Bernie Sanders has
no
plans.
idea how to pay for those plans.
Yes, she does. I think that's the biggest criticism is that she wants to tax super rich
she's
people.
Asked over and over, how are you going to pay for it? How are you going to pay for it? Are you going to raise taxes? Are you going to raise taxes?
The answer is yes. She's been very clear, though. The answer is yes.
She just dodges the questions.
Let's be clear to the audience. Corinne is a Republican, and so she is representing. Thank you for coming, first of all.
Thank you.
Can we clarify too, Dr. Sean?
Conversation.
Corinne, as a Republican, are you supporting Donald Trump?
I do. I am.
And did you vote for him in 2016?
I did. Okay. I volunteered for his campaign in 2016. Okay. I supported him from day one. And I support him still, and I'm actually an advisory board member for his campaign for the Black Voices for Trump.
How long have you been a Republican?
I have been a Republican since 2009. Okay. So I voted for Barack Obama in 2008. I was kind of disenfranchised with the Democrat Party back then, and I kind of felt like, you know, they kind of weren't really, you know, supporting the working class people, that they were more about, you know, raising taxes and increasing regulations. As a business owner, I found how those things were so hard for me to sort of overcome and really make my business a success. And I always felt that the Democrats were for the working class, so I was really disheartened with them. And then Barack Obama came along, and I was like, he gets it. Like, he's going to bring our party back to where we should be. And I got behind him 100%. And then after he was elected, I just saw that he just kind of went right in line with the increased regulations, increased taxes, just, you know, implementing things that made it harder for me and my family to survive, let alone thrive.
But Corinne, I got to ask you, as an African-American woman, you seem super smart, and you're obviously accomplished, and you're beautiful.
Oh, thank you.
How do you, how do you, with good conscience, vote for Donald Trump and support him, given all of the racist and sexist and misogynistic things that he has said, and the 16,000 lies that he has told? How do you do that?
So I think that's probably not a fair question, considering the fact that we just talked about Bloomberg and the things he said, and then we're sitting here talking about how we can. I know, but we're sitting here talking about how he can overcome that. What he said is a million times worse than anybody else. It's even worse than Hillary Clinton's super predator.
But you know,
that's terrible.
Let me say this.
And I don't have to be, you know, in bad conscience. This is what I believe. I do this because this is what I believe.
And on my show, you don't have to feel attacked for what you believe.
Thank you.
But here's the thing. To me, it's important that as we represent our ideas, that we represent our ideas in such a way that we don't say that because someone else is terrible, that makes our ideas good, right? So,
well, that was not what I was saying.
Well,
I said it was hypocritical for that question.
It tends to be the case with Trump supporters, as I've encountered them.
I can understand that.
That when you propose something to them and press them on their ideas, they do whataboutism, right? So the question is Donald Trump's misogyny, Donald Trump's racism, Donald Trump's crazy. Mike Bloomberg has nothing to do with that.
Okay, so then we can talk about that. Then,
yeah.
But so that's the question. So does the comments that he makes about women, the grab the women by the pee, and the other, you know, the name calling that he does with respect to women, how does that impact your support for him, if it does at all?
It doesn't really at all. First of all, I think that what's missing from that is those comments were at this point, they were about 12 to 13 years ago. Okay, so those were comments he made, right or wrong, in a situation that he thought he was having a private conversation with another person. So right or wrong, that was his was his private time. Regarding the fact that he, calls
Come on,
people
Corinne,
names.
We got to be honest, though.
I don't care.
That
I
comment,
don't care.
yes, that was a comment before he was president.
It was a private conversation.
But Donald Trump has not stopped making those kind of inflammatory.
So what has he said lately?
Well, let's talk about what he called Maxine Waters.
What?
He called her dog face. He calls women.
What has she called him?
Okay, there you go. That's what Dr. Sharon just talked about.
It's a tit for tat. It's not me.
It's not.
He calls her that in response.
I would love to hear from how, but. I guess we're going to.
What's the difference? Where is she? Okay. Why is she not in her district? We can talk about that.
But what does that have to do with her?
How come her district's a hot mess?
But should we expect more from our leaders?
DC,
should we be able to turn on the television?
But that's what listen to.
Should we be able to turn on our television and not have the leader of the free world, engage in conduct that you would see on a playground for fifth graders? Is that something that we should, as a country, aspire to have a leader in chief that we all respect and that sets the tone?
I respect him. He doesn't call me names.
Okay.
I guess
if you're an African American woman and you don't feel anything about the way he calls other women names,
I know plenty of African American women that don't feel anything about that. We have a whole coalition of women that don't feel anything we don't care. It's not just me. It's a lot of African American women. So don't get it confused. Like I'm just the only Republican here, and I'm going to be.
You're obviously not, because there were 8% of African Americans voted for Trump in 2016,
and they're going to vote for him again because.
Okay, stop it.
Did you
roaring. People like making.
Hi, welcome.
Yes, get back in here.
Welcome to the show, Brooke. No, it's an interesting conversation. I'm being pedantic, but it's interesting because I guess one of the things I don't understand is how do voters, and we need to get back to this election, but how do voters at the end of the day make their decisions on what they will ignore and what they will cling to? And it is true.
I think we were sort of getting into that a little bit, and I think back to what we were talking about with Bloomberg, that's why my answer to can he recover from this is yes. If you hearing her talk about Donald Trump just here, and respectfully, but that's how I believe that he can recover from rhetoric like that, because look who's the president now. And I'm sitting next to someone kind of defending that, or at least saying that doesn't bother me as much. And I think that on this side, there are going to be people who say that doesn't bother me as much, or I didn't hear it, or it was a long time ago. Right. So should he and can he? The answers are different. But can he? Yeah, absolutely.
If you were talking to young voters, Brooke, because young voters, Bernie Sanders in particular, has made the claim that he's going to increase voter turnout. We're going to see unprecedented voter turnout, particularly amongst young voters. And I think as we look at some of the numbers coming in, the voters under 29 or under 25 are definitely breaking for Senator Sanders. What would you say to young voters who say, I'm not compelled by any of these candidates? What would your, how would you get them engaged in this election?
Sounds like you're breathing. I don't know, but I know that a lot of times throughout life, as a black person, you're not going to, I am not surprised by the prospect of walking into a voting booth. I say this in like holding your nose and just voting for what's the best of what you can see. That happens. That has happened. I'm not surprised that people are like, I'm not excited by this. And it is frustrating, and it's weird. I think that every time we have a primary, two things happen. At least recently they've been happening. We, are looking at how absolutely ridiculous it is that we start with two states that are like something like 95% white. And at the same time, we talk about how black women are the backbone of the Democratic Party. And they are. They have shown that. The most loyal voting bloc, absolutely. But we start with two states where they are so underrepresented that it's ridiculous to even talk about what's happening. Not ridiculous to talk about what's happening, but what people should do based on that, right? So I'm not, it's just not. Oh, also, the second thing is we also learn and see over and over how ridiculous kind of the caucus system is. And thankfully today we have a primary, which is a little easier to understand.
Significantly so.
Right. I think I read that same article. It started with black women are the backbone of the Democrat Party that get taken advantage of. That was the rest of that get taken for granted.
That's not the article that I read. It's not based on an article, more just like based on stats. But I respect that, sure.
We're getting some live results in from New Hampshire. So my producer is letting us know that some new numbers are coming in. So let's take a look. Bernie Sanders, no surprise, holding his slim lead over Pete Buttigieg. I mean, it's a tight race at the top for who's going to be number one at this point. Looks like about 63% of the precincts reporting, and Bernie's got a slight lead over Pete. And Amy Klobuchar, who's had a remarkable comeback. Did you all see her in the last debate?
Yes.
Okay, so a lot of her surge has been credited to her performance at that debate. Elizabeth Warren bringing up the fourth position, and Vice President Joe Biden at this point in fifth place. And at this point, Warren and Biden won't even get any delegates out of this primary because they're not meeting the 15% threshold.
Listen, I know that Team Biden is, this is weird for them. This is not what anybody expected. But the table doesn't start to shake until February 29th when we let black people have a say, when we see what's going on in South Carolina.
So what do you